Hello everyone, my name is Trueslider and I wanted to do a little extra after my gameplay and thoughts, basically on the state of release of Anthem. You can watch all the videos you want and most of them are going to say the exact same thing that I'm going to, but I wanted to be a little more particular on why I think Anthem is in such a meh state as it is. And don't get me wrong, the actual gameplay of Anthem is fantastic. Hands down is probably the only thing that this game has going for it. But in quite honesty, everything else is so wrong. So let me start with the first thing that I think is wrong with this game. Consolitis. The thing about consolitis has become a very derogatory term for downgrading performance and accessibility for the purposes of crossing multiple platforms. And what I wanted to show you quickly is the vault system for junking and salvaging items. It's currently a very slow process. If you look, you're salvaging for 3 seconds and you can't select anything while this is in process. So instead what we do is we flag it as junk. Junk still takes 2 seconds to register per item, and if you go over to the junk screen and accidentally right click, you're not allowed to junk one item for some reason. You have to have a bunch. But when you start to consider the fact that you want to junk multiple items, if you're not doing a batch of 50, you're really not saving any time at all, and it becomes a very cumbersome process. Which is why I think inventory is the biggest thing affected by consolitis. If you look on the right hand side, all these items have so much information being thrown at you, and aside from a little bit of armor reinforcement gauge popping up or duplicates that you're not allowed to wear, you have no idea how much DPS increase, how much versatility increase you're getting out of all these pieces. And the fact that you have a full RPG loot-based game without a character screen or proper inventory comparison screen, it just kills the ease of play. And let's talk about the town too, because you've all seen the videos. The differences between these two towns from the E3 video and what we have now are terribly sparse. There are unit pop-ins, there's unit models that aren't in the right position when you load in. Like, those people just duck down for no reason. When you get into things like the information pop-up screen, like, there is no reason that that screen should take so long to display the limited amount of info that it has. More importantly, if you open up this menu by accident, like if you were trying to look at weekly instead of monthly, then you're sitting there, you're basically committed, you're there mashing the escape button, unable to do anything except for look at these quests. And quite honestly, this whole experience of waiting for a menu to close drives me insane because it becomes a game about loading. Now believe me, I'm not going to give you the lecture on whether you should be using solid state drive or regular hard drives, but you have to understand, if you are playing with solid state drive players, they are going to load in first, they are going to hit the waypoint first, and if you aren't within that 20-second window to get to the waypoint, they're going to trigger another load point for you, so the loads start all over again. And even when you finish the mission, you have to load for that entire time to get to an expedition complete screen, which I am skipping right in front of you, and it still takes forever. It just brings back all of these, like, pointless secondary screens, all this, like, flavorless loading, this redundant loading that seems to be everywhere in this game. And look, I thought I was going into like the model viewer, the least resource required armory, so that I could load the fastest. And it still feels like I am loading Fort Tarsus just to get to a blank window with models. And although BioWare has done a really good job with its recent patches to get these load times down to a reasonable amount, it becomes less about the load times and more about the fact that we have such large stop gaps of time between actual gameplay, finding quests, equipping your character, and getting back in. It just amplifies every other issue that we're about to go through in this game. Okay, so enough beating this to death. Let's stop talking about performance and PC Master Race circle jerk, and let's talk about something that's a little more important. Why this feels like a BioWare game, but at the same time not a BioWare game. People who are familiar with the earlier works of BioWare really would have known that BioWare commands a very strong, story-driven game, on top of the fact that they were able to mesh these seamless mechanics, gameplay, gorgeous sceneries, and somehow just make a perfect story tale of a game. So it's a little odd when you see something like...
Are you crazy? No, I've been standing here waiting for you. Besides, it's your friends we're looking for. Let's go find Alec and Faye.
Fantastic. So if you're unfamiliar with what just happened, during a cutscene in the main town, I just so happened to fall through the earth outside of the dungeon, and yeah, I was able to do full actions, everything. Everything that I would have thought would have crossed someone's mind, I was able to do in the cutscene, and as a result, fall through the world. Now, very sadly, people who may have saw my initial video saw that I fell into a black hole. Well, not a black hole, but a little gap that I couldn't get out of. So, that is to be expected of every game. You can't expect people to crawl through every inch of a game, not being able to find basic things. But the question of polish and Q&A really come into question when we start getting into areas like locking controls out during unskippable cinematic sequences. You know, the fact that most people are complaining that they can't even watch the cinematics is just baffling, because I haven't had a problem with it. But it's the fact that there's just so little effort put into, I would say, 90% of the just engaging conversation and story-driven narrative, that it's just hard to justify it. So after I decided to respawn, I chose to hit escape and hit respawn, a good feature that they implemented in a patch very quickly upon the complaints of many people. And I was greeted with a cinematic bar, which I have actually skipped ahead because it took probably about 2.5 minutes for this bar to finish up completely. At which point, you'll see in a second here, it just kind of spits me out. So once you're done sitting through the cinematic in progress waiting screen, you are of course greeted with a black loading screen, hopefully to resync yourself to the rest of the party, which, to BioWare's defense, I didn't have to exit my story. I didn't get stuck and couldn't progress my story. It worked well enough that I could just continue. Just maybe I missed a huge plot point or twist or something that I will never know. I've tried to keep the spoilers in this review to a minimum, but it's one thing to not tell you, it's another thing not to know what's going to happen. And the reason I want to address story isn't just about what the story contains, but also is how it's told. And previous BioWare used to be really good at this, but I don't know what has happened. It's become a case of the AAA narrative unicorn. And unfortunately at this point, I would have to say that Anthem is just not it. Somewhere along the lines, I don't know, let's pick a date, maybe E3 2017, where we were kind of given a glimpse of some sort of engaging, emotional storyline. I mean, you remember this guy, right? If you don't, go ahead and watch the video I've included in the link. This is a lot of what I was basing my hype for the game off of. So I think it's a bit of a stretch to call the world overdramatic when you come at us with these Mass Effect Andromeda style polish of faces. I mean, you don't have a world of faces to compete with this time. You have one town of what, 20 interactable people? And I won't go in depth to all the E3 versus real play changes, because that is beaten to death, and you can find a lot more engaging and entertaining videos than mine for that. But it's so disconnecting when you see polished scenes like the one here versus walking around and talking to the people that you expect people to connect with in order to build a reputation, when all they're doing is just giving you eyebrow raises and wide mouth opens. Like, if we go back and we have another conversation with Owen, look at him. That is not what I would consider an engaging face. This is just your stock animatronic face. And it's so inconsistent, it throws me off. And some of these people aren't just nobodies. Like, take for example Halleck. He was in the original demo. He was actually hyped up as one of the original heroes. And so it's just so disconnecting when you see everyone making these weird faces that you just instantly try and skip through all the conversations. And then there are the side people who, look at this. One eyebrow is like 2 inches above the other, and it just feel like there's such little effort put in that it just removes you from any sort of an engaging conversation. Like, I don't want to talk to these people. I don't want to connect with these people if there's no effort put into it. Otherwise, it's just stock dialogue. And my best example of this possibly is this one moron that you find between the two loading doors in this stupid town. Let me show you.
Man, with something like that, you should really soak it. Hey, does this look like it's infected? So did you hear anything about that guy thing? I learned that one the hard way. So did you hear anything about that guy and the thing?
And so you might be asking yourself, Trueslider, you big baboo, why don't you just give up playing this game and go back to playing something that's fun? Well, I mean, the gameplay is really fun. I know that it's a grind. I know that I'm going to be just busting my ass trying to get legendaries and get masterwork mats that I assume will come into craftable patterns for me to get the best combination of weapons. But I mean, it's fun. I'm having a fun time doing it. And in fact, I have some friends playing with me at the same time. Maybe it's just the fact that it feels so weird to me that EA wants to push all of its games it publishes as a game as a service. Like, you can play the full game as it is right now for, what is it? In Canada here, it's $20 plus tax. So instead of paying full price, you get your early access. You get access to the regular game for 1 month and for $20. But what I don't want it to feel like is this is the proper approach for a game that has nothing to do in the end. And yeah, there's always going to be arguments that loot grinding is the end game, but there's only 3 dungeons in this end game. And like, there's not like there's a powerful storyline that is commanding you to continue to follow through. In fact, parts of the story feel like they're just kind of like filler time extending quests just to kind of draw out your maximum play time. So if you get that sentiment from this game, I mean, make sure that you know that you're not alone. And it's tough because you know that it's going to be a very unpopular choice to push out a game with not zero content, but only just a, I'm going to call it a mouthful of content to get you through this entire game. I know people who paid full amounts are going to be like, cool, well, I got my 30 hours in. I guess I'll wait 6 months for something to happen, for something to show up in this game. But if you have followed at least the patch notes, in the very least, BioWare has been on top of their game, patching bugs, making temporary fixes. I know people want like 48-hour turnaround service. but I think for what they're doing, they're making it worthwhile. But really, these next couple months are going to be about finding the polish that people might have been hoping to get at launch. There's a big concern regarding the rate at which legendaries drop, which is both good and bad. You can understand if BioWare doesn't want to release or give everyone easy access to legendaries if they're planning on having very difficult content later on. I wouldn't necessarily agree right now that the scaling works in your favor from going from Grandmaster 1 to Grandmaster 2, but it's doable. The game isn't, completely bug free. I have found an instance where people have figured out how to glitch a dungeon and just ended up farming one of the loot boxes for, well, I'm assuming it was Grandmaster 1, so it was just going to be masterwork, if anything. But yeah, to say that this is a properly finished game ready for launch, it's just such a hard sell. And here's why. The abilities are good, but especially like finding proper support abilities, they're so scarce. And on top of that is just there always seems to be a new bug that's created when old bugs disappear. For example, if you haven't hit level 25 to get into kind of like the sweet zone before hitting level 29 so you can actually start getting masterwork weapons, you'll be stuck in these free roaming loops. And maybe free roaming is the wrong way to describe it. You get bonus EXP for joining and helping other people in their quests, but just over this recent weekend, I think it was like February 21st, 22nd, 23rd, being able to help one of those quests, I think I got 1 in 8 that wasn't in a permanently bugged state, and so we were just kind of brushing it off, not worrying too much, because who knows, maybe it's just one hot fix away from being done properly for us to be able to join other people's games, until those bugs actually leaked into our version or our started instances. So we weren't actually able to complete our own quests because the radar wouldn't show up and we'd have no clue where to go to track down these mobs. There's definitely a lot of skill rebalance, I think, to be done. Melee combat is okay, but there's not too much depth to it. Most people are actually pretty upset when they get the melee masterwork. Well, I know my Storm and Rangers friends just absolutely hate it, so I'm gonna take their word for it. Seeing how I've only been playing Colossus and Interceptor. But yeah, it's hard to sell a loot grind when there is very little loot to get. On top of that, one of my bigger worries is that the crafting system is going to fall so far behind, it's just going to be used for like monthly quests. And I'm talking about the weapons that you had to grind in Destiny in order to be viable. I guess viable is probably in the eyes of the beholder, but just getting those weapons in Destiny, just once you were done, you're like, okay, well, this was a complete waste of time because one expansion is gonna screw everything up. And so I'm definitely in the worry boat when it comes to these sort of things. In terms of like microtransactions, the skins are cool. The emotes are alright. Painting, whatever. To each their own. But for me, I'm going to be just avoiding the microtransaction market like the plague. And really, it comes down to personal preference because, honestly, out of the box, I think this game is just kind of gorgeous. Sure, it doesn't live up to the full E3 standards, which, you should learn your lesson by now. If you're judging E3 anything, because, hype sells more than actual gameplay itself. But realistically, this game doesn't deserve more than a 7 out of 10. in any review in its current state. And I guarantee you I will eat my words if they come out with a proper Nightfall like rating system, or something to do once you get past the initial story, because you can just breeze right through it without even noticing that it's there. And once it's gone, you're making your own fun. But in the end, I'm still gonna play it. I still have at least a month, and after you do the whatever, when you're subscribed to the Origin program, you get a discount if you actually choose to buy the game, which we'll see what the future has in store. At the very least, I don't want to get Bethesda, which I don't know. Given EA's kind of commitment to making this work and get quick patches out and not making you download a 46 gigabyte patch, I think they're still doing things right. But I hope you have found this at least a little bit informative. I didn't want it to be just one big, I don't know, complain bitch fest, but know that everyone who is actually complaining about this game has quite a bit of warranted comment about what's happening, what's going on, and everyone is oversensitive about any sort of announcement, so I don't know, maybe bad PR. But if you get one good thing out of this is I still recommend the game. I would almost anticipate it to be a better success than the original Destiny Taken King. Like, I guess for me, really, the Taken King was what revitalized Destiny, and then Destiny 2 just kind of like forgot about that. But yeah, if anything, just hold out. If you're still on the fence about purchasing it, realistically, if you don't want to do Origin Premier, there's no rush. But I don't know. It's fun. It's beautiful. I love the combat. It's like Warframe combat. It's just so smooth and everything is just fine. But yeah, I'm going to end my rant now in this wonderful sunset. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.